We seduce ourselves by knowing the true nature of reality. Seduction is knowledge, it's carnal knowledge. It's know thyself, which means love yourself open. Make love and birth your highest self through knowing your true nature and knowing the nature of reality. And when I know the nature of reality, what do I know? I know that reality is Eros at its core. Reality is love, but not love which is mere human sentiment, love which is the heart of existence itself. Love is Eros, the heart of existence itself, that lives uniquely in me. And that I'm a unique configuration of Eros that participates in the field of Eros. And I know that Eros, that love is real. That reality is not merely a fact, reality is a story. That story is a first value and first principle of cosmos, and that story is a love story. So David, we've got a huge code for this week. Resonate the code, brother. Blow us away. Take us inside.
So this week's evolutionary love code. There is no love without seduction. Seduction is a first principle and first value of cosmos. Wisdom is to distinguish between holy seduction and unholy seduction. Holy seduction seduces upwards. Unholy seduction seduces downwards. Unholy seduction is, I seduce you to violate your appropriate boundary for the sake of my greed. Whereas holy seduction is, I seduce you to transcend the boundary of your limitation, of your contraction, for the sake of your and reality's deepest need. Everyone is seduced. The question is to trust the right person to seduce you, or the right people, or art, or music, or dharma. So with that, it's my delight to turn my word back to you, beloved Dr. Marc.
Oh my God. David, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So let's look at that code that David gorgeously resonated for us. So there's no love without seduction. And our topic this week is seduce yourself. And we're in a series of talks. This is the third one, right, around this topic of seduce yourself, right? The Delphic Oracle said, know thyself, but know is carnal. Adam knew his wife Eve, right? It's sensual, right? Sense making is sensual. To know yourself is to make sense out of yourself, even as we stand before the mystery. And so carnal knowledge, sense making, the sensuality of sense making in the universe, which is a love story, in the cosmorotic universe, right? In the Amorous Cosmos, requires seduction, because seduction itself is a first principle and first value of cosmos. And we talked about 2 weeks ago, we talked about these two kinds of seduction. We talked about an unholy seduction, in which I seduce someone to break their appropriate boundary for the sake of my greed, which is juxtaposed with sacred seduction, and in which I seduce someone to break their contracted boundary, the boundary of their limitation for the sake of their own deepest need. And of course, that applies not just to the seduction of other, but even more profoundly to self-seduction. Seduce thyself is the new oracle. The Homo Amor oracle is seduce thyself, which means I have to seduce myself to break the boundary of my limitation, the boundary of my contraction, because that's my own deepest need. And it's not only my own deepest need, but as Meir Ibn Gabbai writes, a great interior scientist in the 16th century, Avodat Tzorech Gavoha, reality needs your service. Reality needs you to seduce yourself to your own greatness. And so we're going to talk about that deeply this week, because that's going to lead us to next week, which is about confessing your greatness. So let's take a look at it, right? And we said, right, 2 weeks ago, wisdom is to distinguish between holy and unholy seduction. David just resonated the code, right? Holy seduction seduces upwards, right? Unholy seduction seduces downwards. Unholy seduction, I seduced you to violate your appropriate boundary for the sake of my greed. Holy seduction. I seduce you to transcend the boundary of the limitation of your contraction for the sake of your and reality's deepest need. Let's add to that. If the penultimate human self is a separate self is the end of the whole story. And separate self is defined by their boundaries, right? Don't violate my boundaries. That's how separate self defines themselves. If that's the penultimate human, which is how Western society generally understands the human being, so then if I seduce you, right, to violate your separate self, I'm causing you to regress. Because if separate self is the penultimate, that's the personal, the only place to go is down to the pre-personal. But if actually I understand that there's a larger field of existence in which you live, but the larger field in which you live is your true self, you actually participate in the seamless code of the universe. You participate in the field of desire. True self, the total number of true selves is one, as Erwin Schrödinger, the physicist, wrote, the singular that has no plural. And then you seduce yourself even more deeply into your unique self, which is your irreducibly unique individuation of the field of true self. Unique self is the unique set of eyes, the unique quality of intimacy, the unique capacity, right? That individuated expression of the field of true self, of the field of consciousness and desire. That is you, that is me, that's your unique self. And then I locate that unique self in an evolutionary context. Right? This wider evolutionary context in which I realize I am uniquely evolution. And evolution is throbbing and pulsing in me. So that's evolutionary unique self. And then as an evolutionary unique self in this larger evolutionary context, right, I'm a unique expression of the Eros of Cosmos. I'm a unique expression of evolutionary love. I then take up my instrument and play my music in the unique self symphony. Right, this self-organizing, self-actualizing cosmos through unique self symphonies, in which we all, each of us, individually and together in groups of unique self, address the unique needs in our unique circle of intimacy and influence. Then we generate Homo Amor. That's what Homo Amor, that's the new human and the new humanity. So that seduction, if you seduce yourself to that, seduce thyself, and we have to seduce each other to our true self. We have to seduce each other to our unique self. We have to seduce each other to our evolutionary unique self. We have to seduce each other musically to join the unique self symphony. Okay, that's our context. Now, what we want to do this week is take this one huge step further. Okay, are we in? We're not just repeating yesterday, right? We're not just kind of, right? We're in. We got to fly now. Okay, we got to like madly, dramatically fly. We got to break through now and understand first principles and first values in a whole new way. How do I seduce myself? Drum roll it is. Here we go. Whoa! Woo! Yes. Okay, here we go. I'm going to start with the end of where we want to go today. I know we're already in the middle, but I want to jump to the end. I'm going to put the end on the table and then go back to the beginning and then get us back to the end. Our topic is seduce thyself. What does it mean to seduce yourself? This is our third week, our third, right, meditation on seduction. These are meditations on seduction to invoke the new human and the new humanity, right? Meditations on seduction, right, to seduce ourselves, right, from Homo sapien to Homo Amor, to cross to the other side. Okay, so let me perhaps introduce something. Let me introduce, something about, a topic that we all know kind of intuitively. And I would call that topic music. What is the most powerful instrument of seduction? Is clearly music. Music seduces, right? Music changes our mood. And the move from Homo sapien to Homo Amor takes place when we change our mood. And then when we change the mood of culture. Heidegger was not wrong when he said everything's about mood. Right? Mood is the fundamental category, right, of reality itself. So we have to change our mood. We have to deepen our mood. Music changes our mood at its core. Now, I want to talk to you about music a little bit, okay? And if I can, with your permission, let me see if I can find this now. I want to, just read you something that I wrote this morning. Is that okay to do, everybody? I just wrote something this morning right before church. Can I read that to you? right? Which is really about what we're talking about. Let me just check the chat box and see if I have permission. Can I read that, guys? Is that okay? I wrote it like literally right before. Is that good? Everyone in? Okay. We good? Okay, I have permission? Okay. Okay. So I'm going to start in the middle. It was Aldous Huxley who reminded us that music discloses the blessedness that it is at the heart of all things. And of course, and so it's been from the beginning of time, the preponderance of music, its rhythms, melodies, and lyrics speak of love. Music is about love songs. It may be personal love or its loss. It may be the love of spirit, of nature, of country, or their loss. But music is always about love. It's agonies and ecstasies. It's devotions and demands. It's rapture and ravaging. That's always what's at the center of music, right? Music is love songs in all of their myriad forms. And music itself is the inner form of mathematics, right? The avowedly anti-materialist transcendentalist, right? The New England transcendentalists, right? A woman who was a close colleague of all of them. Her name was Margaret Fuller. She died at age 40, right? She's a brilliant woman. She echoes the pre-Socratic Pythagoreans when she writes, all truth is comprised of music and mathematics. But now stay close, friends. But music itself does not exist before the manifest world of matter emerges. There is no music before there's matter. For sound itself is made of matter, right? Sound is an expression of one of the earliest forms of matter, gravitational waves. And gravitational waves, disclosed by Einstein's mathematical formula, which only in 2015 was one of the greatest scientific experiments able to disclose when we enacted a kind of 3-kilometer long tuning fork, if you will, right? Music itself, right? The gravitational waves that form music are an expression of time. Music's an expression of time, which, as Einstein's relativity, rooted in mathematics, disclosed, time is not separate from space, right? So we live in and we're composed of the space-time continuum. Does everyone get that? We live in and we're composed of the space-time continuum. And so music, at its core, is made up not of notes of sound, but rather music is made up of what sound is at its core. Music is made up of atoms of time. Music is made up of atoms of time. So if you go back to the Big Bang, when the single point of the singularity stretches itself out in a line, so time is birthed into reality. And within that line of time, there's continuity. Moments distinguish themselves. And it's the distinction of moments that allows for chords and harmonies. It's in the distinction of moments, the break in the continuity of time, that rhythm and melody are born. Now, friends, this gets wild. Once we realize that music is the stuff of time, and that we ourselves are made of time, then we further realize that we're made of music. Let me say that again. Once we realize that music is the stuff of time, and that we ourselves we're made of time, like time is part of the space-time continuum, it's part of matter. That original matter in the first nanoseconds of the Big Bang, when the space-time continuum is born, lives in us. We're composed of it. So once we realize that music is the stuff of time, and that we ourselves are made of time, we further realize that we are made of music. Isn't that beautiful? Forget about it whether you got it all. Okay, but just can you feel it? Who can feel that? Who can feel that? Who can just feel it? Just feel it. Don't try and, we're made of music. Okay, wow. So the music that seduces us lives inside of us. Okay? Now, that's the end. Now let's go back to the beginning. Okay? Let's go back to the beginning. Okay? Let's go back to the beginning. It's crazy, wildly beautiful. So, how do we seduce ourselves? We seduce ourselves by knowing the true nature of reality. Seduction is knowledge. It's carnal knowledge. It's know thyself, which means love yourself open. Make love and birth your highest self through knowing your true nature and knowing the nature of reality. And when I know the nature of reality, what do I know? I know that reality is Eros at its core. Reality is love, but not love which is mere human sentiment, love which is the heart of existence itself. Love is Eros, the heart of existence itself, that lives uniquely in me. And that I'm a unique configuration of Eros that participates in the field of Eros. And I know that Eros, that love, is real. That reality is not merely a fact, reality is a story. That story is a first value and first principle of cosmos, and that story is a love story. It's a story of Eros, it's a story of the evolution of Eros. So I have to seduce myself to that knowledge, to that gnosis. I have to seduce myself to that gnosis that lives in me, right? And to do that, I have to unfurnish my eyes. How did Emily Dickinson write it? Not revelation 'tis that waits, but my unfurnished eyes, E-Y-E-S. Not revelation 'tis that waits, but my unfurnished eyes. And if I would but cleanse the door of perception, then I would realize that everything I look upon is infinite, wrote William Blake. So let's find this. I've got to unfurnish my eyes. So what eyes do I have to unfurnish? What eyes do I have to unfurnish? And Barbara and I talked about this a lot. So there are three fundamental eyes, and I'm going to talk about them in a completely new way. And this gets crazy gorgeous, but we need kind of every word here, okay? So the first eye is what we might call the eye of the flesh or the eye of the senses. And the eye of the flesh and the eye of the senses is empirical. Ever know what I mean by empirical? Meaning I have direct access to gnosis, to knowledge. I want to know if it's raining outside. I go outside and I put my hand out. Oh, there's rain. It's raining. Okay, got it. It's raining. So I do an experiment, or what Thomas Kuhn called an injunction. Right? I do an injunction, an experiment. I get a result, a new gnosis, an illumination, a new gnosis, a new piece of knowledge. And then it's, as Popper required, Karl Popper, it's falsifiable, because I can ask someone else to do that same injunction, that same experiment, and if they do it consistently and rigorously, they'll get some version of the same result. That's the eye of the senses. Now, not science, not modern true science, not classical science, but scientism, the dogmas of modern science, made a claim. And it said the only real empiricism, right, on which valid science is based, is the empiricism of the eye of the senses, and a second eye that we're about to describe, right? They call it sensory empiricism, right? It's only true if I can see it under a microscope, if the eye of the senses reveal it to me, right? And the eye of the senses, right, might be my eyes, it might be a telescope, it might be a microscope, it might be an fMRI machine, right, charting the waves of the brain, it might be the Hubble telescope. But the eye of the senses, or the eye of the flesh, that's the first eye, operate together with a second eye. But the second eye can see dimensions of reality that the first eye can't see. Now, you need, right, the eye of the senses. You can't move without them. You have to develop them very deeply. But they're insufficient because there's all sorts of things you can't see with the eye of the senses. For example, the eye of the senses can't see mathematics. They can't see logic, right? right? They can't see moral reasoning, classical political reasoning, right? So moral reasoning, mathematics and logic are actually available not to the eye of the senses or the eye of the flesh, but to the second eye. We'll give it two different names. We might call that the eye of the mind or the eye of reason. Okay? That makes sense, everybody? But those two eyes, everyone with us? Who's with us? Who's with us? Who's with us all the way? Who's with us? Deep on the inside with us. Who's with us? Okay? You with us? Okay, here we go. Let's go. Here we go. So those two eyes, though, can't tell me anything about that which matters most to me. Or at least that's the way it's usually understood. Because they can't tell me about love. Certainly they can't tell me that love is real. They can't tell me about loyalty. They can't really tell me about spirit. They can't tell me about value, right? They can only tell me that which lives in the world of the measurable. But they can't tell me about the immeasurable. They can't tell me about the priceless. So the eye of the senses, right, and the eye of the mind tell me important things about the measurable. They tell me important things about the commodifiable. They allow for modern science. They give me massive empirical information, right? The eye of the senses gives me sensory empiricism, and the eye of the mind gives me what we might call mental empiricism, right? That's beautiful. But they can't tell me about consciousness. So I want to introduce a third eye. I'm going to do it carefully. And I want to call it, for the first time in public, I want to call it the eye of consciousness. Do you get that? The eye of consciousness. I'm going to call the third eye the eye of consciousness. And the third eye has 4 expressions. Okay? 4 expressions. 1, the eye of the heart. Right? That which I see through the heart. The Sufis use that word a lot. Okay? The second, used more often by, let's say, the Buddhist world or the Vedanta world, let's call it the eye of contemplation. A third word, which I coined a bunch of months ago, we'll call it the eye of value. And a fourth word, used by Christian mystics, the eye of the spirit. Does everyone get that? Everyone tracking here? Okay, everyone tracking here? 4 eyes. Okay, these are 4 expressions of the eye of consciousness. Okay, these are 4 expressions. This is big. 4 expressions of the eye of consciousness. Now, who's tracking? Who's with us? Who's with us? Who's with us? Who's with us? Stay inside. 4 expressions of the eye of consciousness. Okay, we're articulating, okay, this new understanding in first vows and first principles. There's an eye of consciousness and has 4 expressions. Now, what's the difference between these 4 expressions? Are these just overlapping, right, inter-included? Well, they are. They're all expressions of the eye of consciousness, but each one involves, stay close, a somewhat different practice or a somewhat different injunction. So let's say, I'm going to do this just very loosely in 2 minutes. This takes several hours, but let's say, just to get it for a second. So the eye of contemplation might involve meditation, right? That might open the eye of contemplation. You get that? The eye of love, or the eye of the heart, right, might be opened through the practice of loving, right? So the eye of contemplation, you might sit zazen in Buddhism. You might meditate your way to enlightenment, right? In the eye of the heart, you might do what I like to call loving your way to enlightenment. The actual injunction, the practice is to be an outrageous lover. Does everyone get that? The practice is to love, right? The practice is not meditate. The practice is to love. Now, those eyes, of course, can live together with each other, but the question is, what's the primary practice? So the primary practice, right, is in the eye of the heart is love, right? Love, right, to become an outrageous lover, to write outrageous love letters, right? To awaken the eye of the heart is the way that you actually, it's not cute, it's not sweet, it's not lovely, it's the ultimate practice, it's the injunction that opens the eye of the heart and you actually love your way into being Homo Amor. The eye of value, right, the third expression of the eye of consciousness is you actually see directly value. You see goodness, and you identify goodness, and you understand that goodness is a discernment of the eye of value. So you say reality should be fair. Why should reality be fair? Because your eye of value discerns that fairness or justice or lady justice is an expression, right, of the field of consciousness. Right? So you discern reality through ethics, right? And there's kind of an ethical monopantheism, right? Ethics, ethos, it suffuses reality. Value suffuses reality. Reality is a field of value, and you're able to discern value directly, so you enter through the door of value. And finally, number 4, the fourth expression of the eye of consciousness, the eye of the spirit, comes from doing ritual, right? I actually do ritual in a particular tradition, right? I do ceremony, right? Right? I study sacred text, right? And as I engage in a kind of the classical expressions of the spiritual, which give me access, direct access, right, to the field of spirit, right, to the field of consciousness. So the difference between these 4 eyes is A, they have different practices, and B, each one opens a somewhat different quality, right, of the field of the infinite, right? The field of the true self, right? The field of consciousness. Does everyone get that? Who's got that so far? That's a lot. But now we're about to make the leap. Now it's about to get crazy, wild, beautiful, right? We're going to go to the next step. There's a big, huge next step, okay? Big, huge next step. This is beautiful. I've been thinking about this kind of day and night the last 2 weeks to try and clarify this so we can actually move first principles and first values forward. So we're used to thinking, and the way the pre-moderns thought about it, although they didn't use these terms exactly, but they thought that the 3 eyes were distinct from each other. Everyone stay really close. Got to stay really, really close here. Okay, is everyone ready to go? Ujis, you ready? You ready, brother? Michael, we good? Okay, stay really close. It's crazy, beautiful, and wildly important. We've got to discern this. So in the medieval period, to the extent that they understood these 3 eyes, they didn't use the eye of consciousness, they didn't have the breakdown into the 4 expressions of the eye of consciousness, but they had the general distinction between, let's say, the eye of flesh, the eye of reason, the eye of the spirit. They had that general distinction. But what did they think? They believed in the great chain of being. The great chain of being is a partial important truth of reality. And the great chain of being, and Arthur Lovejoy wrote a very, very important book on the great chain of being, right, is the understanding that there's this movement in reality from matter, right, what we call the inanimate, right, to life, the biological world, to mind, right, the world of culture, of mind, right, to actually soul, right, the ensouled, right, expression of the human being, and soul is kind of more individual, and then to spirit, right, the ground of spirit of the whole thing. Does everyone get that? Right, matter, right, let's call that the physiosphere, life, the biosphere, mind, what de Chardin might have called, right, the Jesuit paleontologist, right, might have called the noosphere, the world of mind, soul, right, the spiritual quality, right, of the individual human being, and then spirit, right, the field of spirit. Does everyone get that? Maybe we can jot it in the chat box. Let's see if we can jot it in the chat box, okay? Matter, life, mind, soul, spirit. Now here's the thing, stay close. But what the medievalists assumed, and most of the great religions still assume, is that matter's at the bottom, right, and soul and spirit are on top, right? Which means, right, if science, for example, talks about matter, then science talks about the bottom stuff, or science talks about life. That's the number 2 towards the bottom. Or the social sciences might talk about, right, mind, but the real stuff, the high stuff, soul and spirit, that's for religion. That's a mistake. Actually, it's not that matter's at the bottom, and matter, let's call matter exteriors. Maybe we can write that in the chat box. Matter equal exteriors. It's not that, that's not true, that's a mistake. It's not that matter's at the bottom and then spirit or soul, which we might call interiors, everyone get that? Interiors is at top. No, it's not matter exteriors is at the bottom and soul, spirit, interiors are at the top. Mistake. It's not true. Rather, stay really close, it's interiors and exteriors all the way up and all the way down, right? So reality, and I call that pan-interiority. A new name created about a year ago, late at night, right? Pan-interiority. That reality is interiors and exteriors all the way up and all the way down, right? Which is why, for example, you can take a medicine journey. You can decide to take a journey, a certain kind of psychedelic journey, right? And you might take, I'm not suggesting this, right? But you might, right? And you might ingest a certain plant. That plant might affect your physiology, and then your physiology will open you up to the eye of consciousness. Well, how could that be true? If matter's at the bottom and soul and spirit on top, if exteriors are at the bottom, right, and interiors on top, they have nothing to do with each other. So we have to revision the great chain of being. That reality all the way up and all the way down is pan-interiority. It's interiors and exteriors all the way up and all the way down. Now this is really, really important. It gets wild and beautiful and important. What that then tells me is, okay, how many people are still with me? Who's with us? Who's with? Give us a yes if you're with us, okay? We just got 5 more minutes, but it's 5 more minutes when it starts. We bring it all together. We with us? We good, everybody? Okay, we've got 5 minutes. Can we do this? Okay, so it's interiors and exteriors, right, all the way up and all the way down. But what that tells me is that it's one field of reality, right? Excuse me, it's one Eros. It's one heart. It's one consciousness, right? It's one world, or it's one reality. It's not a fragmented and fractured reality, right? So therefore, if that's true, then really these three eyes are not separate from each other. These three eyes are inter-included with each other, right? They're interdigitated. The three eyes are really three expressions of one eye. And actually, right, it's not true that in order to seduce yourself, you have to transcend the world of matter. You have to transcend, end the trance of the body, right, and play a harp. No, music itself is of the world of matter. Harps are not in heaven. Harps are an expression of the material universe itself. And so actually, when you go to the depth of any of the eyes, E-Y-E-S, right, they're actually going to show you, if you use all three of them together, you will seduce yourself into the knowing that reality is a love story. Now, the next 4 minutes is everything, okay? In other words, let me say that sentence again. If you deploy all three eyes together as expressions of the one eye, you will actually be able to know directly in your own beingness that the very core of reality is Eros, that you participate in that Eros is real, that Eros has a narrative arc, a story, that story is a love story, and that you participate in that love story. Now, stay close. But you don't know that through, for example, by studying the new sciences. That's not true. You don't study, let me study the new physics, or let me study systems theory or complexity theory. And systems theory is the beginning, and then complexity theory is systems theory plus the new mathematics that were possible when computers were introduced. You don't say, okay, I'm going to study the new physics, which are now 100 years old, or I'm going to study, general dynamics theory, which later becomes systems theory and complexity theory and chaos theory, and I'm going to therefore have this understanding that reality is a love story. No, you can study systems theory and chaos theory, or the new physics, and still be dogmatically committed to the world being a materialist. And even though you see the world, for example, a system, you say it's a system of interconnected flatland its, I-T-S, interconnected its. And there were many theorists of the Western Enlightenment, right, who said, oh, the world's not atomistic, it's not atomized, it's not separate parts, it's all one system, who were materialists. Because they were arguing about, is the material world constructed from atomized separate parts, or is it a system? But it's a system of reductive materialist its. because you can open up the eye of the mind. You can be an expert in muons and the mathematics involved with muons, as Steven Weinberg was, for example, or as Hawking was in other dimensions, studying black holes and more, and be a complete materialist, complete amoral, and have no sense of the universe being a love story. That's really important, right? The myth that there's a new paradigm in science, right, that gives you, right, the universal love story is not true. Does everyone track closely? Now, stay close. That doesn't mean we don't critically need the eye of the senses and the eye of the mind. We do. But the three eyes interanimate each other, right? So when I open the eye, take Ramanujan, right? Ramanujan, right? The great mathematician, right, from India that was noticed by Harding, right, who was at Cambridge, right, in Collingwood, who bring Ramanujan. And Ramanujan says, right, mathematics doesn't exist for me unless it lives in the mind of the infinite. And so actually Ramanujan, who opens the eye of contemplation and the eye of the spirit and the eye of the heart, when he looks at the field of mathematics, right, he sees the shimmering field of Eros. When I look at complexity theory, but after I've opened the eye of the heart, which means I have direct access to a translogical field. I have direct access to a trans-mind field, right? Not to pre-rational, but to a trans-mind field where I'm actually living in the field of consciousness. I've opened the eye of consciousness. And the eye of consciousness is pulsing with the heart of the cosmos. I've removed the blocks and I realize that at my core, right, I am the substance of love, which is the fabric of reality. Once I have that direct realization, I'm not speaking about it, I am it. I'm writing outrageous love letters, so I'm opening the eye of the heart. It's our core practice, right? I write outrageous love letters to myself, to trees, right, to reality, to a moment in time. And we'll spend, in a couple of weeks, I hope, maybe just an entire one mountain talking about outrageous love letters, about that practice. But once I open the eye of the heart, let's say through outrageous love letters or through chant, or I open the eye of contemplation through deep zazen meditation, or I practice, right, profoundly ritual and I read sacred texts and I open the eye of the spirit, or I live in the vivified sense of the very goodness of reality, the pulsing goodness, the eye of value and intrinsic value. Once I open those eyes, then when I then turn back to the eye of the mind and I look at complexity theory, I realize that complexity theory is not a system of interconnected its, but complexity theory is the mathematics of intimacy. And intimacy is the interior of interconnectivity. That we live in an intimate universe, and complexity theory is the mathematics of intimacy. Remember, an intimacy is the interior of interconnectivity, right? In other words, when I use the eyes together, then I seduce myself to the knowing that reality is a love story, right? When I've opened, let's go to sex for a second. When I open the eye of the heart, then sex becomes love in the body. Does everyone get that? Right? When I open the eye of the heart, sex becomes love in the body. Right? When Krishna and Radha merge in ecstatic union, right? That's because sexing is love in the body. Right? Does everyone get that? I mean, it's stunning. Right? So in other words, the eyes, let's say the eye of the senses, so let's say sex is the eye of the senses, it's touch. It's one of the five senses, it's touch. But when I open the eye of the senses, touch, merged with the eye of the heart, then I realize, oh, sex is love in the body. Sex is cosmic eros performed in the flesh, right? And that's the same thing that happens in music. What is music? Right? Music is not merely sound, right? Music is sound, which is itself atoms of time. And time is part of the space-time continuum, right? So we're made of time and music is made of time, which means we're made of music, right? So it's not just that music affects us, music lives in us. And music is the eye of the senses in its most exquisite form, which then collapses into the eye of the heart, the eye of contemplation, the eye of the spirit. Take a look at the book of Kings 2, chapter 3, verse 13, when Elisha, right, Benjamin, Elisha, right, when Elisha, his name is Elisha the prophet, right, turns to his colleague and he says, I want to open up the eye of the spirit, the heart, and he says, Ve'ata kechuli minagen, take from me a player of music. Vaya kinagen haminagen. Literally, it's translated, when the minstrel, the music player, plays music. But in Hebrew, it means when the player of music becomes the music. Does everyone get that? And so in the interior sciences, we say the player of music becomes the music because I am the music. So music actually is, it seems like the eye of the spirit, but it's actually the eye of the senses and the eye of the spirit together. And Pythagoras already pointed out that music and mathematics are actually the inner and outer face of each other. So mathematics is the eye of the mind. So music is both the eye of the senses, right? We are made of music. Music is made of matter. Sound is made of matter. We are music. We are sound, right? It lives in us. The space-time continuum, right, which is the structure of music, lives inside of us. Right? And music is mathematics. It's the eye of the mind. And music is what awakens the prophet in me, what awakens Homo Amor in me. Right? And so to seduce myself, I have to not just deploy the eye of the senses or the eye of the mind, I have to deploy the eye of consciousness in all of its four forms, the eye of spirit, the eye of the heart, the eye of value, the eye of contemplation. But, and this is the key, I've got to deploy them together with understand that it's inner included. It's one eye, it's one reality, it's one heart, it's one cosmos, it's one field. And so I actually seduce myself by seeing, by unfurnishing my eyes, by cleansing the doors of perception, by deploying all of the eyes together, sex as love in the body, music, right, as the very quality, right, which discloses, we go back to Huxley, the blessedness at the heart of all things. And blessing is an interior. But music, which is made of matter, discloses that interior. So this is what we tried to lay out today was the path of seduction. How do we seduce ourselves?